This was another pretty action-packed, adventurous episode of one of the more interesting shows that you could probably watch this season. And for a couple of weeks now, I think it's been a very common opinion in the community following this wonderful show that the Symphonica probably can't be trusted. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially given the fact that they pretty much appeared the exact same time the D2s appeared. And I'm generally curious myself if it's going to go in the direction that I've seen other series use when there's some form of threat where something pops up that keeps the peace, quote unquote, because one, they probably could destroy the threat, or maybe they even created the threat. But ultimately, you always want it to stick around because that's how you're going to continue making your living and people will depend on you. And if they're not going to go that direction, I think the twist, which I saw pointed out in my comments last week from a handful of individuals, which I really liked, it's not my theory, it's just what people are coming up with, which is kind of brilliant. What if the idea of what's happening to our boy Takt isn't supposed to happen to him because maybe it's like supposed to happen to the controllee, right? Because what if the idea of him being suffered and, painful, like pretty much killing his life force, what if the people that are turned into these basically fighting machines are the one who are supposed to have their life force drained? And ultimately, that's kind of like a big secret, and somehow because of Caseus not supposed to becoming Destiny, given that it was such an odd kind of like evolution and talk and the connection, and the whole situation, like maybe that's kind of like about to spoil the beans of what's truly going on. And maybe it's a combination of everything I just said. Either way, there's something off. I clearly believe that they are fighting the D2s, but I'm not convinced that the D2s either A, weren't a creation of their own doing, that, we got last week, the meteorite, everything like that, how they came to be, quote unquote. But that's also a story from Lenny. And while I definitely trust Lenny, I really do, I think he's hiding some things, but I don't think he's someone who's actively trying to harm people. Though, I also don't think maybe Lenny knows the full story, and if he does, it'll be interesting to see how him and Takt will get introduced again, because I mentioned how last week I was hoping whenever they do eventually part, because when the show kicked off with episode 1, Lenny and Titan were nowhere to be found, and we knew they were going to part ways, but what if they ended up dead before that happened? So I'm glad that they did leave. I'm just hoping the next time we meet up with these guys, it's not going to be a gun to the forehead sort of a situation, which it definitely could be. Either way, I think a show like this needs that kind of mystery of, should you trust the organization that's supposed to be helping you? Just look at what Lenny and Titan did in this episode, right? They busted down Las Vegas. Essentially, like, there was some D2s down below, there was music, there was gambling, it was pretty much like what you thought Las Vegas would be in a normal situation. Just this time, they have actual fields for crops, which is, maybe some people will kind of raise an eyebrow, but I say if we're having aliens supposedly coming from outer space, growable crops in Las Vegas desert, I guess is, something that could happen in this world and its version of reality. But I think it's interesting because this was pretty much a training episode and a learning episode for our boy Takt, because this is all new to him. He wants to play, and he doesn't want to have to deal with this stupid Musicart, which is something that he refuses to call her Cosette the same way her sister does, because one, she's now become Destiny, if everything is to be believed, and ultimately, the person that he cared for seemingly is no longer there. But it's interesting because there's a lot of humor and charm with the just individual, mannerisms. Like when they first got to the farm, right? And you saw certain characters doing the heart with their fingers in the background, and sometimes they'd focus right up and close, but often you would see Destiny in the background kind of mimicking it and kind of raising it up. You have all these little cute mannerisms that they don't need to be there, but when a scene is interacting with each other, whether it's characters talking or observing from the distance, everyone's kind of doing their own thing. From the poses, the way they sit, and the fact that they're not just stiff standing around, they feel like people more often than not, despite kind of having this D2 phenomena kind of coming down and crashing. But it's interesting because for the people of this farmland, right, they moved in, they had a connection with Titan and Lenny. For them, it seems like paradise is here. We're getting back on track. The world's coming closer and closer. And that's why I'm really starting to wonder, because for Lenny, he didn't tell them because he doesn't want to worry them, and I really believe he's not someone who's going to turn out to be this big bad evil like maybe some people are a little worried about. But there's something about the organization that supposedly protects them. It really feels to me like one of those situations where you wouldn't want to cure a disease, because once you cure a disease, you'll no longer make money from curing said disease. And it almost feels like this threat for the organization, most likely, probably is a similar state. They're probably government funded and things like that. You can't really just send your average army to deal with them. You need these creatures, and if there's some form of experimentation where you can turn people into what someone like Destiny is, at a cost of them having a 5-year lifespan, but you can deal with it, you don't need to tell the public thanks you, and you're, showing results. Oh shit, more coming, and what if they're creating D2s themselves at this point? There's just so many different things at play that could really create a pretty messy narrative for characters like Takt as well as Destiny in terms of how they would deal with it and what type of sacrifices they would ultimately want to do in order to put it to rest once and for all. I feel like once we get to our main objective, probably around episode 9 or 10, I would imagine, is when they get to their destination. The answers that they learn about are probably going to be either A, work with us or get killed sort of a thing. It'd be interesting if Lenny, decided to work with our boy Takt instead. Either way, I think there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of heart that the anime's clearly wearing on its sleeve, there's a lot to its story, its world, and the animation and, with the action scenes remain to be really fun. In this episode, we pretty much have D2s that acted like water buffaloes. I just absolutely loved them just kind of like running around and shooting the legs, and the kind of comedic relief of when Titan and Destiny were talking, and she was kind of explaining how she ultimately does what she does, and she's making all these sound effects and gestures, and then Destiny, with the straightest of faces, turns to our boy and says, yeah, if you just do all of that, we should be A-okay. And I'm like, holy shit, this show has some really good humor. The idea of her just continuing to break through walls, I think that is a gimmick that might get old should the characters not evolve with it, but I think from what we've seen with her crashing diners to the place that they're staying at, or just kind of grabbing guards by the face and tossing them outside the window, I love how she's so outlandish, and how for someone like Takt, you can tell that's not the person he loves and cares for. So you can understand his kind of monotone, dry reaction of she's an idiot. There's a lot of pain behind that, while simultaneously kind of being funny for the viewers all at the same time, which is a really nice bonus. For me, every Tuesday is always going to be a blessing as long as this show's airing. It's something that has a really interesting world, and I never get tired of looking at the numerous character designs and the way the colors and kind of, especially the backgrounds, kind of pop off on screen. That scene where, I think it was one of the first scenes we saw of like the corn in a building. There's just so much little detail to that, and I really like the attention that they're putting into background details for, when I heard about the journey they're going on, it's going to be a dirt road, they're going to here to there, I'm like, there's not going to be that too many crazy backgrounds, and then they really started to like amplify them more and more, and I'm like, okay, it's not just going to be the like lights and the animation for the fights that's going to blow me away. I'm going to be impressed by goddamn cornfields, and, that's just me, especially if you've seen reviews on, like, the Slime Diaries and things like that. I love background details like these, and it really blows me away, but a lot to think about, I believe, in this episode, and I would be really interested in hearing people's theories and speculations on Symphonica and, Titan, Lenny. Do you trust any of it? Do you think they're behind the D2's phenomena? I'd love to know theories down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.